She never told anyone why she stayed. Not the first night, not the seventh, not on any of the 9 nights she sat in the chair beside the bed, in room 12 of the third-floor medical surgical unit at Temecula Valley Hospital, long past the end of her shift, talking with a man whose name she had read on a chart, and whose face she had not yet connected to any other context. She stayed because of something that had happened 18 months earlier, 400 miles north of Temecula, in a hospital room she had never entered and would never see. She stayed because of nurses she had never met and could never thank. She stayed because the debt she carried from those 6 weeks had to go somewhere, and the man in room 12 was alone in the specific way her son had been alone, and she could not repay what had been given to her boy except by giving it to someone else. She did not explain this to anyone. It was not the kind of thing that fits in an explanation. On the 9th night, a day shift nurse named Cora came in 40 minutes early for handover, the way Cora always did, and stopped at the door of room 12 when she saw the chair and the woman in it, and the man in the bed who was laughing at something. A real laugh. The kind a person produces when they have genuinely been surprised by something funny. Cora looked at the name on the chart outside the door. She looked again. She went to find Maggie when Maggie finally came out at 7:15, still in her scrubs, her coat over her arm, heading for the elevator. Cora said, "Maggie, room 12." Maggie stopped. "I know who he is," Cora said. Maggie looked at her. "Does he know you've been staying?" Cora said. "No," Maggie said. Cora looked at her for a moment. "Are you going to tell him?" Maggie thought about it. The elevator door opened. She stepped in. "Probably not," she said. The door closed. She was back at 7 the following evening. There is a hospital in Temecula, California, called Temecula Valley Hospital. It sits on Loma Linda Road, in the hill country of the Inland Empire, where the ground rises and the air carries the particular quality of a place slightly above the valley floor. Cooler at night. Quieter in a way that is not just the absence of traffic, but something in the terrain itself. The hospital opened in 2013, which makes it new by the standards of the institutions around it. And it has the particular cleanliness of a building that has not yet had time to accumulate the complicated history that older hospitals carry in their walls. The third-floor medical surgical unit ran 32 beds across 2 corridors. Night shift was 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. 12 hours, with a staffing ratio of 1 nurse to 5 patients when the unit ran at budget and 1 nurse to 6 or 7 when it did not, which was more often than the administration's staffing models acknowledged. The unit smelled, as all hospital units smell, of antiseptic and the particular warmth of forced air heating in a building where the windows do not open. And underneath that, in the way that underneath things are always present, if you know how to look, the smell of people who are frightened and waiting. Room 12 was at the far end of the east corridor, second from the last. It had a single window that looked out at the parking structure, which was not a view of anything. But at night, the parking structure's lights created a pale amber glow that came through the blinds in parallel lines across the ceiling. And if the room was dark and the blinds were half open, it looked, in a way that was not unpleasant, like the inside of something sheltered. The man in room 12 had been admitted through the emergency department 9 days before Maggie first stayed. Motorcycle accident. Fractured radius. 2 fractured ribs. A lacerated spleen that had required surgical intervention, and a 4-day ICU stay before he was transferred to the medical surgical floor. The injury was serious, and the recovery was real, but the trajectory was forward. He was not in danger. He was in the particular position of someone who has been badly hurt and must now wait, atentible, patiently, without being able to hurry anything, while the body does the work of returning to itself. His intake form listed no emergency contacts. Under next of kin, the field was blank. He was, in the formal institutional sense, alone. The nurses who had cared for him in the ICU had noted, in the handover summary, that he was cooperative, uncomplaining, and asked for nothing he did not need. He read, "He slept in the way that injured people sleep, deeply, suddenly, at irregular intervals. It was polite with the specificity of someone who understands that the people caring for him have other rooms to attend to and that politeness is itself a form of consideration." He had been in room 12 for 2 days when Maggie took over as his primary night nurse. Margaret O'Say had been a registered nurse for 32 years. She had trained in Accra, Ghana, at the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital's nursing school, graduating in 1991 at the age of 23. She had come to the United States the following year, following a husband whose engineering contract had brought them to Southern California, and she had spent 6 months navigating the credential recognition process before she was permitted to sit for the NCLEX, and she had passed it on her first attempt, and she had been working in American hospitals ever since. She was 61 years old. She was 5 feet 4 and carried herself with the specific uprightness of someone who has been on her feet for long shifts for 3 decades and has developed, without meaning to, a posture that communicates both competence and the expectation of being taken seriously. Her hair was silver, kept close. She wore the same brand of clogs she had been wearing for 15 years, replaced every 2 years because the right footwear was not a preference but a professional requirement. And she had learned this at cost early in her career and not repeated the mistake. She earned $94,000 a year, which was $4,000 less than the male-charged nurse on the day shift, with 11 fewer years of experience, a fact that had been raised in the union review 3 years running without resolution. She was 2 years from retirement. She had planned, since her 58th birthday, to retire at 63. She had a plan. It involved a specific house in Accra her sister had found, a garden, a slower pace. She had told her son about the plan. He had said she had earned it. Her son's name was Daniel. He was 34 years old and a registered nurse himself, trained partly because of her, working at a hospital in Sacramento. He had been in a car accident 18 months ago, a Sunday morning in February. A driver who had run a red light on Richards Boulevard and had spent 6 weeks in a medical surgical unit at UC Davis Medical Center with a broken pelvis, 2 cracked vertebrae, and the kind of soft tissue damage that requires time the body itself schedules. Maggie had been at work at Temecula Valley when the call came. She had finished her shift. She had driven home. She had sat in her car in her driveway and called the charge nurse at the UC Davis unit, a woman she had never spoken to. And that woman had spent 12 minutes on the phone with her. 12 minutes she did not have to spend. 12 minutos that came from some reserve of human generosity that Maggie had no framework to account for, telling her in specific, factual, compassionate terms exactly what was happening with Daniel and what the next weeks would look like. Maggie had driven to Sacramento the following day, her one day off, and sat with Daniel for 8 hours. Then she had driven back and worked her next shift. She had done this 6 times, over 6 weeks. The charge nurse at UC Davis, her name was Yolanda, Maggie had learned it on the 3rd call, had stayed late on 2 of those 6 nights, sitting with Daniel after visiting hours ended, because Daniel was alone the way people are alone at night in hospital rooms, and Yolanda had decided that was not acceptable when she had the capacity to address it. Maggie had never met Yolanda in person. She had sent a card. She had cried when she wrote it. On the 3rd night of her assignment to room 12, Maggie did her 2 o'clock check and found the man awake, not restless, not in pain, or not showing it. Sitting up at the angle the adjustable bed permitted, a battered paperback open in his hand, the bedside lamp on low, the room otherwise dark. He looked up when she came in, and his expression was the expression of someone interrupted from something absorbing rather than from sleep. She checked his vitals. She adjusted his IV line. She asked if he needed anything. He sighed he was fine. She started toward the door. She stopped. She was not sure, afterward, why she stopped. She had been a night nurse for 19 years, and she had developed over those years a reliable instinct for the difference between a patient who was fine and a patient who was fine in the way that people are fine when they are alone at 2 in the morning in a hospital room, with no one listed under next of kin, which is a different category entirely. She turned back. "What are you reading?" she said. He looked at the cover. "Dostoevsky," he said. "The Idiot. Is it good?" "It's very good." He paused. "It's also very long." She looked at the chair beside the bed, the chair that was there for visitors who had not come. "Do you mind?" she said. He looked at the chair. "Please?" he said. She sat down. They talked for 40 minutes, not about the book. They started with the book and moved somewhere else. The way conversations move at 2 in the morning when 2 people are both awake and neither of them has anywhere to be. She did not ask him what he did. He did not ask her how long she had been a nurse in the way people ask, when they want to place you. They talked about Accra, which he wanted to know about, and about the drive from Sacramento that she made every other month now to see Daniel, who was recovered but not entirely, in the ways that recovery from serious injury is always not entirely. At 2:40, she stood up. I should finish my rounds, she said. Of course, he said. He had been listening to everything she said with the quality of attention that she associated in her experience with people who were genuinely interested, rather than people performing interest. Good night, she said. Good night, Maggie, he said. She did her rounds. She thought about the conversation for the rest of the shift in the way you think about something when you are not expecting to think about it. The way it surfaces between tasks, between rooms, between the small mechanical urgencies of the night. She came back the following night. Sandra Kwan had been the unit supervisor on the third-floor medical surgical unit for 8 years. She was 44 years old, Korean-American, the daughter of 2 physicians who had raised her with the specific expectation of medical achievement that a certain kind of family instills, and that Sandra had met, in her way, by becoming a nurse rather than a doctor, which had been a compromise that had taken several years to fully negotiate in both directions. She had been a good bedside nurse, genuinely good. Her patient satisfaction scores in her first 4 years had been in the top decile of the unit, which is a specific kind of good that requires both technical skill and the particular quality of presence that some nurses have and that is very difficult to train into the ones who don't. Her supervisor at the time had told her she had the instincts for administration. She had taken the promotion at 36, which was younger than most, and she had been good at that too. What she had not been prepared for was the way administration would gradually replace the things she had been good at first: the budget reviews, the staffing matrices, the incident reports, and the compliance audits and the board presentations that required her to translate the texture of patient care into the language of metrics, which was a translation that always lost something in the crossing, and that she had, over 8 years, become practiced at performing without letting herself feel the loss. The overtime on Maddie's timesheets had appeared in Sandra's weekly report 11 days ago. It was not a large amount: 40 minutes the first night, an hour the third, 90 minutes on the fifth, an hour and 20 on the sixth. The pattern was clear. The reason was not documented, which was the procedural issue. But Sandra knew the reason. You did not run a night shift unit for 8 years without knowing when one of your nurses was sitting with a patient. She had said something to Maggie on the 8th morning, at the end of shift handover, in the specific way of a supervisor who is delivering a message she is not entirely comfortable delivering. She had said, "The overtime on your last few shifts, Maggie. I need a documented reason for the billing code or I have to flag it." Maggie had looked at her. "Patient support," Maggie had said. "I'll document it." Sandra had nodded. She had started to walk away. She had stopped. She had not said the thing she almost said, which was, "I know what you're doing. I used to do it too." She had not said it because saying it would have required her to also say the thing after it, which was, "And I was asked to stop, and I did, and I'm still not sure I was right to." Those were not sentences she was ready to say out loud to anyone, including herself. She had walked away. On the 9th night, the last night before his discharge, Maggie sat in the chair for the last time. They had talked every night for 6 of the 9 nights. The 7th, she had been pulled to another patient in distress and had not come back before dawn. On the 8th, he had slept through in the deep, sudden way he sometimes slept, and she had stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at him and turned back to the corridor. Tonight, the battered Dostoevsky was on the bedside table, finished. He had moved on to a different book, something thinner. She sat down. "Last night," she said. "I know. The doctor said tomorrow afternoon. How are you feeling?" "Like someone who would like to sleep in his own bed," he said. She smiled. They were quiet for a moment. "Maggie," he said. She looked at him. "I know you have other patients. I know you've been staying past your shift." He said it carefully, the way someone says a thing they have been thinking about how to say. "I want you to know that I don't have the right word. It's mattered." She looked at her hands. "I had reasons of my own," she said. "I know," he said. "I could tell." She was quiet. "Someone did this for my son," she said, "when he was hurt. I couldn't be there the way I wanted to be. A nurse at his hospital stayed. He never got to thank her properly." She paused. "You can't always give it back to the person who gave it to you." He was still. So you give it to someone else, he said. Someone who needs it, she said. The parking structure light came through the half-open blinds in its parallel lines across the ceiling. Somewhere down the corridor, a monitor beeped twice and went quiet. What's your son's name? He said. Daniel. Is he well? Better, she said. Not completely, but better. He nodded. I'm glad, he said. He said it the way people say things that are true. At 2:50, she stood up. I'll be at the desk at discharge tomorrow, she said. But I won't be on shift, so. So, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, Maggie, he said. She did her rounds. She thought about Daniel, and about Yolanda, and about the card she had written and cried over, and about all the things that travel sideways through the world from person to person, and arrive where they are needed without anyone being able to trace the route. She found out who it was in the break room on the fourth floor. Cora had come in early, seen the chart, done the math, and come to find her. It had taken Cora 40 seconds to connect the name and the face and the motorcycle accident. She was 33 years old and had seen the man's films with her mother, the way you see certain films with your mother, sitting on a couch in the particular warmth of a shared thing. She found Maggie in the break room. She said the name. Maggie listened. She looked at the wall. She looked at her coffee. She said, all right. Cora waited. He's being discharged this afternoon, Maggie said. Make sure the paperwork is clean and the follow-up appointments are scheduled before he goes. She stood up. I'll be in to check on 14 and 17. Cora stood in the break room doorway. That's it? She said. Maggie looked at her. What did you think was going to happen? She said. She went to check on 14 and 17. It was discharged at 2:15 in the afternoon. Maggie was not on shift. She had gone home at 7:15, driven the 40 minutes to her house in Murrieta, slept until noon, and come back because she had a half-day personal errand in Temecula anyway, and because she wanted to see him leave. Not to say anything, just to see it. She was in the corridor near the elevator when he came out of room 12 in street clothes, dark jeans, a gray sweatshirt slightly too large for the shoulder that had been operated on. Careful in his movement but moving without assistance. The discharge nurse had the paperwork. He signed where he needed to sign. He shook the discharge nurse's hand. He looked up. He saw Maggie. He smiled. She nodded. He walked to the elevator. He pushed the button. While he waited, he turned back. Maggie, he said. Yes, your son's name, Daniel. The nurse at his hospital. He paused. Which hospital? UC Davis, she said. Medical center. Night shift charge. About 18 months ago. Her name is Yolanda. He held her gaze for a moment. Then the elevator opened. He got in. The door closed. She stood in the corridor for a moment. Then she went home. She told almost no one. She told her sister in Accra on their next Sunday call, because she told her sister everything. Her sister sighed, what did you do when you found out? Maggie said she had gone to check on 14 and 17. Her sister laughed for a long time. Maggie laughed too. She told Daniel. He was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he said, of course it was. She asked him what he meant. He said, you wouldn't stay late for someone ordinary. It had to be someone who deserved it. She told him that was not how she thought about it. He said, I know, Mom. That's exactly what I mean. 3 weeks after the discharge, Sandra Kwan received an email through the hospital's administrative contact form. It was brief. It said that a member of the nursing staff on the third-floor medical surgical unit had provided exceptional care during a recent admission. It did not describe the care in general terms. It described it specifically: the chair pulled to the side of the bed, the specific nights, the conversation about Accra and the drive to Sacramento. The quality of attention that had made a difference in the particular way that presence makes a difference when someone is alone at 2 in the morning in a hospital room with nothing listed under. Next of kin. The email asked that the recognition be formal, on record, and that the staff member's supervisor be made aware of it. It was signed with a name. Sandra read the email twice. She sat with it for a moment. She printed it and walked down the hall to the unit and knocked on the door of the small office at the end of the east corridor where Maggie kept her paperwork. Maggie looked up. Sandra set the printout on the desk. She said, I owe you an apology. Maggie looked at the printout, then at Sandra. The overtime conversation, Sandra said. 8 days ago, I said something I didn't mean the way I said it. She paused. What you were doing in that room, I knew what it was. I should have said so. Maggie looked at her for a moment. I know what it costs you, Maggie said. This job, the part you gave up. Sandra said nothing. I don't think you want to keep doing it this way, Maggie said. I think you haven't found the other way yet. Sandra looked at the wall of the small office. The bulletin board with the scheduling grid. The union contact number. The photograph of the 2019 unit Christmas party that Maggie kept because 3 of the nurses in it had since left for other hospitals and she wanted to remember them where they were. No, Sandra said finally. I haven't. She picked up the printout. She looked at it for another moment. I'm going to put this in your file, she said, formally. She left. The email was not the only thing that arrived. A week after it, the night shift charge nurse on the medical surgical unit at UC Davis Medical Center received a call from a private foundation she had heard of but had no existing relationship with. The foundation operated a nursing excellence grant, unrestricted, renewable, awarded to specific individual nurses rather than programs or institutions, selected through a referral process that was not public. The call was to tell Yolanda that she had been nominated and that the foundation would like to begin the review process. The grant was $18,000 annually for 3 years. Yolanda asked who had nominated her. The foundation's representative said the nomination was confidential. Yolanda sighed. Was it a patient? Someone I cared for? The representative said she couldn't confirm that. Yolanda said, all right. She accepted the nomination. She used the first year's grant to fund a professional development sabbatical, a month in which she attended a specialized training program in palliative care communication that she had been trying to find the budget for 4 years. She came back from it and began running a monthly session for the night shift at UC Davis on the specific skills of presence at difficult hours. The chair pulled to the side of the bed. The quality of attention that makes a difference. The things you can offer a person who is alone at 2 in the morning that no medication provides. She called the session Being There. It was not a curriculum she had developed from a textbook. It was everything she already knew, organized and offered to the people coming up behind her. Maggie did not retire at 63. She had the plan. The house in Accra, her sister's find. The garden. It was still there at 63, still possible, still waiting. She thought about it seriously in the spring before her birthday. She talked to Daniel about it. He said, "What do you want to do?" She thought about the chair. She thought about the parallel lines of light across the ceiling. She thought about the specific conversation at 2 in the morning about Dostoevsky and Accra and the drive to Sacramento. The quality of attention on the other side of that conversation that had made her feel, for the first time in longer than she could place, that what she was doing in the chair was not a private act of debt repayment, but something that existed in a larger circuit she could not see the full shape of, but could feel moving. She sighed. I'm going to work 1 more year. She worked 2 more years. She retired at 65 in May, on a morning shift that ended at 3 in the afternoon. The unit threw a party in the break room. Sandra Kwan gave a speech that was 3 minutes long and did not require notes. Cora cried. The night shift sent a card signed by every name on the roster, which was 21 signatures, plus a note from the 2 nurses who had been off that week and had asked Cora to add them anyway. Daniel drove down from Sacramento for the party. He shook Sandra's hand at the end of it. Thank you for what you said to her, he said. 2 years ago, in the small office. Sandra looked at him. She told you about that? She tells me everything, he said. I have been thinking about the circuit. Not the story, the shape underneath it, the way something given at UC Davis traveled sideways to Temecula, and the way something given in Temecula traveled back to UC Davis. And how neither Maggie nor Yolanda knew when they pulled their chairs to the side of a bed at 2 in the morning that they were part of the same movement. You cannot trace it forward from any single act. You can only see it from far enough above, and even then, only partially. A woman stayed with the son. The son's nurse stayed after her shift. The son's mother began staying after her shift. The man in room 12 made a call. The call reached the night shift at UC Davis. Yolanda began teaching other nurses to pull their chairs to the side of the bed. Where does it end? I have no idea. I genuinely don't. The honest answer is that it probably doesn't end. It just changes shape, disperses, becomes the atmosphere that other acts of grace are performed inside of, too diffuse to trace to any origin point. I think about Maggie driving home at 7:15 in the morning after a 12-hour night shift, thinking about her son in Sacramento and a nurse she had never met and a debt she could not pay back to the person she owed it to. I think about the chair, the specific decision, un remarkable from the outside, to stop at the door instead of walking through it. I don't know if I would have stopped. I'd like to think I would. But I know that at 7:15 in the morning, at the end of a 12-hour shift, with a son recovering 400 miles away and a retirement, I could count in months. Stopping at the door is harder than it sounds. She stopped, and something moved. I keep coming back to that. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known generosity and his reputation for the kind of attention that does not announce itself. If something in this one found you, drop a comment. Not what you thought of it, what you thought of when you read it. The specific ones stay with me the longest. Share it with a nurse or anyone who has ever stayed past when they were supposed to leave. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next story. See you in the next one.